Good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. I'd like to also humbly acknowledge the land which you live, learn, work, and play is Treaty 8 territory, traditional lands of the Korean Dene, and unceded territory of the Métis people. For the record, we have Councillor Ball and Councillor Stroud on camera. And Councillor, if anyone in attendance wishes to address Council on any of the agenda items, please register now with Legislative Services Desk, located to my right, as I'll be only calling on those who have been registered to speak. Following your submission, please remain seated for 5 minutes for questions from Council. You must also register prior to the start of the agenda item, which you are registered to speak on, and registered delegates are permitted to 5 minutes to speak and must remain on topic. Are there any concerns of Council in combining the approval of both sets of minutes, July 10th and July 19th this evening? Hearing none, can I have someone make the motion to approve the minutes? Councillor Weigel.
I move that the minutes of special council meetings held on July 10th, 2023 and July 19th, 2003 be approved as presented.
Thank you. Can I have someone second the motion? Councillor Walkman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second that motion.
Thank you. Are there any changes or additions or deletions to the agenda? Not seeing any. Call for a vote. All in favor? And Councillor Stroud? Councillor Stroud, how do you vote on that? Do you want to get Oliver?
I have my sound on.
Okay, we can just hear you now. How do you vote on that, Councillor Stroud?
I vote in favor.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next up, we have the report on CUPE 1505, Collecting Bargaining Ratification 2023. I'd like to invite Carrie Donnelly, Director of Human Resources, and Tim Mitchell, External Legal Counsel with McLennan Ross, will be joining via Teams to introduce the report.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. For the record, my name is Carrie Donnelly, and I am the Director of Human Resources for the Regional Municipality of Wood Buffalo. I am accompanied tonight by Tim Mitchell, our lead negotiator from McLennan Ross, via Teams. With the aid of a labor mediator, the RMWB and CUPE Local 1505 bargaining committees concluded collective bargaining and negotiated the terms of a renewed collective agreement. This new collective agreement meets the financial mandate provided from this council. The terms of the agreement are contained in a mediator's recommendation. This recommendation contains the mediator's recommendation on an outstanding item between the parties regarding job evaluations. This recommendation also attaches a memorandum of settlement which contains all other agreed to language revisions by the parties, which includes enhancements to 19 different articles. These articles are identified in your council report for tonight. This 4-year agreement spans from January 1, 2021 through to the end of December 31st, 2024, and represents a 9% wage increase. The wage details of the 4-year agreement include a 2-year increase for 2021, a 2% increase for 2021, a 2% increase for 2022, a 3% increase for 2023, and a 2% increase for 2024. Contained in this financial mandate includes a process to address the reevaluation and red-circled positions. This recommended 4-year agreement was presented by CUPE Bargaining Committee to their membership, and as of yesterday, August 14th, they have officially confirmed a ratification vote. This 9% wage increase over a 4-year term represents a total wage increase of $9,967,455. Before you tonight is a motion asking Council to ratify the collective agreement between the RMWB and CUPE Local 1505. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members of both bargaining committees for reaching this agreement, and I look forward to continuing our working relationship with CUPE Local 1505. Thank you, and Mr. Mitchell and I are welcome to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Donald. Do we have any questions from council? Not seeing any. Thank you, Carrie. Do we have any delegates to this item?
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. We have no delegates.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Cardinal.
Through the chair, how's it going, Mayor?
Good.
Right on. Carrie, thank you for the presentation. For the CUPE, whatever. Sorry, but this is like all through all municipal governments, right? Am I correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Cardinal, this agreement applies to the regional municipality of Wood Buffalo. The other municipalities in the province have their own agreements.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's what I meant to ask. It's specifically for this region. Sorry.
Correct.
It is okay. All right. That's all I wanted to know.
Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. Councillor Weigel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that. And this might not be relevant, and so feel free. But because this pertains to 2001 to 2024, are we on the verge of then going straight back into an agreement for the next, as this is going to end at the end of next year?
Through the chair to Councillor Weigel, the nominal term is from 2001 to 2024, which means that in 2025 we will be back bargaining with CUPE again.
So we're always negotiating after the contract is completed?
Through the chair to Councillor Weigel, this time definitely. There were a lot of challenges getting through to this term of collective bargaining, a lot of challenges that stemmed from COVID-19, from all of the other issues that we've had in the region in terms of the 1 in 100-year flood. Normally it doesn't take this long to negotiate a collective agreement, but in this particular case it did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a little bit further on what Councillor Weigel was saying. Wouldn't it make sense that we prepare ourselves to negotiate? I mean, I've worked for the city for a long time, and we didn't like to run them 3 years past the bargaining dates. So would it not be prudent to start that process as soon as possible, so we're not sitting in a back pay situation like we are now?
Through the chair to Councillor Ball, the window of starting negotiations starts near the term end of the collective agreement. So that means that there's a period of time, a short window of time before the end of the agreement, that notice is given to bargain and that we would go to the table. But we are preparing for 2025 bargaining now. And I'm not sure if, Tim, if you wanted to add anything further to that.
Through the chair to Councillor Ball. When you look at most municipal collective agreements, the term is 3 years. The difficulty is that, and we did contemplate a longer collective agreement. The problem with that obviously is you have to buy more things, and this is what we achieved in order to come within the financial mandate. It was a 3-year deal, and so it would be very difficult for us to achieve better. And it's not uncommon right now. I'm at about 50 tables at any given time across the province in private and public sector. With the amount of inflation that's been going on, you are seeing many agreements sort of midway through or more at the time that bargaining is being completed, just because of the amount of uncertainty for all the parties.
No, I can appreciate that. I'm just saying I think we need to prepare ourselves and be ready versus last minute sort of thing and extending this. This has been a few years now, so a couple of years. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Cardinal?
Thanks, Mayor. Let me try this again. I think I was half asleep there. It made it sound like I didn't know what I was talking about. I do know it's about our region, but the question I guess I really wanted to get to was from a municipal perspective, how is it through the whole CUPE that that rate is happening in a benchmarking perspective from our region, or are we like a higher percentage, or is it just our negotiation bargaining agreement with CUPE ourselves? I mean, I know it's ourselves, but I kind of wanted to get a sense of how other municipalities are. Have we? Because from reading some of the, the briefing stuff, I don't think that I've came across anything that had some sort of a benchmarking thing. So I just kind of maybe if I can get an answer on that, Carrie, please.
Through the chair to Councillor Cardinal, we do benchmark against other municipalities. When we came forward in camera in November of 2022, we did provide benchmarking information at the time. There has been some agreements that have since then been successfully negotiated and ratified. And I think I'll turn it over to Tim Mitchell, who, as you heard, negotiates for many municipalities and for other entities. So Tim, if you'd like to add to that, that would be great.
Sure. So in terms of the historical comparison internally, what you've achieved in prior rounds of collective bargaining, this agreement is towards the lower end of the spectrum. You've had agreements, three-year agreements as high, cresting at 17% before. So 9% over 3 years is on the lower end of the spectrum. In terms of where do you benchmark against other municipalities, you are towards the upper end, but not by a significant amount. Not when you look at it against historically where you've been. Historically, CUPE negotiations for the RMWB have always resulted in significantly higher awards in terms of looking at City of Calgary, City of Edmonton, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, etc. And that's partly because of the price of labor, which is unique in your region. We have to also look at, who are you competing with locally in terms of those people trying to attract and retain employees. And when you look at them within your local market, we're at and as we should be in the public sector, on the lower end of the spectrum. But as compared to other municipalities, you are seeing 2s and 3s, whereas obviously we've got 9 over 3, so we're a little bit higher, but nowhere near, as I said, as compared to historically where you've been. You're, as I suggested, when you look at this over extended period of time, you're coming down significantly as compared to your historical average.
Thanks, Tim. To the chair, to the presenters. So on the lower end, why are we on that? Why are we on the lower end? Just for clarification, and we have a higher end and a lower end. So the lower end, why are we on the lower end of that part?
So through the chair to Councillor Cardinal, perhaps I can provide some clarity there. So if you look over the last 15 years, obviously the price of labor during that period of time has gone up and down. And there's been periods of time where the local market the wage rates went skyrocketing up. And so as a result of that, the annual wage increases that the regional municipality had to provide were significantly higher. Then because the price of oil went plummeting, you saw the wage increases being in 0, 1, 2 range. And so it has more to do with the commodity prices in the province that we're unfortunately always in Alberta tied somewhat with labor prices to the price of oil. And so that was a factory as well. So it has more to do with the broader economy in terms of what the general wage increase would be in any given period of time.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you both for your presentation, and hope the community members understood that just as much as I did. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. Councillor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Karen, for the presentation. Thank you, and I can imagine the work that you guys you went through to get to this point. I wanted to know how this payment would be done. I'm hearing 2021-22. So obviously there will be some retroactive payment, and then I'm looking at how that affects budget. Or did you already plan this increase into 2021-22, or is this going to come out of 2023 budget? How is this going to work? Yeah.
Through the chair to Councillor Bonjoko, to answer the series of questions that you've asked there, there will be retro payments back to 2021. So the payments of the increases for January 1st, 2021, the payment increase for January 1st, 2022, and the payment increase for 2023 back to January 1 will be paid as a lump sum. And then the hourly rates adjust in 2023 at the date of ratification, and we will be paying that through payroll. We did we didn't know for sure what the end, we made some assumptions that the 9% mandate would be what we would go with for salaries. So that has been incorporated into the budget. And I will, by all means, I am your HR person. I'm not your financial person. So I'm not sure if our CFO wants to add anything further to that, but there is money budgeted for this.
Thank you, Director Donnelly. Just to confirm, we established an accrual in prior years in addition to identifying some cost savings in the current year budget to help with the funding, and reserves had been set up historically, knowing that we needed to come to a point where we would resolve the bargaining at some point. So we do have sufficient funding available, which will not impact the current year budget, but the increases will form a part of the 2024 budget process.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Benjoko. Do you have any other questions from council? Not seeing any, I'll have someone make the motion. Councillor Grandison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the collective agreement with the Canadian Union of Public Employees Local 1505 for a 4-year nominal term from January 2021, December 31st to December 31st, 2024 be ratified by council.
Thank you. Someone second that motion. Councillor Benjoko.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I second that motion.
Thank you. Are any other questions from council? Not seeing any, I call for a vote. All in favor? And Councillor Stroud?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Director Donnelly. Next, we have a report on the Draper Voluntary Buyout Program closing costs. I'd like to invite Kelly Hansen, Director of Strategic Planning and Program Management, and Amanda Hayes, Acting Director of Planning Development, to introduce the report, please.
Microphone.
just one more time. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kelly Hansen, Director of Strategic Planning and Program Management. I'm here with my colleague Amanda Hiatus, Acting Director of Planning and Development, as well as we're accompanied by Chris Davis, Senior Manager with Legal Services. This evening, administration is recommending that up to $2,500 be made available for each eligible Draper property to reimburse closing costs as a part of Council's approved voluntary buyout program, which was approved on July 11th of this year. Of note, our recommendation this evening does not require additional funds beyond what was approved on July 11th and is being put forward in the interest of improving the municipality's position should future disputes arise over any aspect of the sales. For ease of reference, the Council-approved resolution from July 11th, 2023 is as follows. That administration be directed to proceed offering an immediate voluntary buyout of properties with dwellings with a main floor elevation of 250.9 meters or less in Draper at the assessed value used for the 2023 tax year, and that the voluntary buyout be offered until September 12th, 2023, and that up to $14,912,170 be allocated from Emerging Issues Reserve for immediate voluntary buyouts. In keeping with this direction, administration is in the process of delivering the immediate buyouts with the funding that has been allocated. Administration's intent was to include up to $2,500 per eligible property to support the closing costs with the program as a part of the approved budget. However, this was not clearly articulated by myself to Council during July 11th meeting. As such, administration is recommending closing costs be made available to the eligible property owners in Draper. There's no request for additional funding this evening, as administration views the approved funding within the July 11th resolution as the program's maximum costs and will utilize that funding for the purchase of eligible properties and supplemental costs, including but not limited to consulting services, security, fencing, removal, relocation, and any other reasonable expenses that might be incurred. The rationale for the recommendation are the following. Improvement of the municipality's position should future disputes arise, for example, environmental warranty or abandonment of personal items. Provision of provides property owners with sufficient funds to secure independent legal advice. The use of title insurance would allow for prompt release of funds and expedite the next steps, and is in alignment with GOA funding approach for previous buyouts. Thank you. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. I just have a quick question before we go on to everyone else's questions. The only question I have actually, Kelly, it might be for Mr. Davison at legal. I'm just wondering if there's any conflict of interest where the seller, if we're paying for the seller's legal advice, legal fees, wouldn't the seller's lawyer, shouldn't they be representing in the seller's best interest? Would there be any kind of conflict of interest if we're the ones paying for those legal fees? Let me turn your mic on.
Through the chair, if the director Hanson will allow me to respond. It's actually in a way the opposite. We really do want any sellers to make sure that they have good legal representation. It's to our advantage in the whole closing process to have that. First of all, it will be the obligation of the seller to prepare the necessary transfer document and associated paperwork to sell the parcel. We also want them to, the sellers to, when they look at our offer, to have good advice on the various alternatives available and the clauses in the agreement, and to be able to run those variables by somebody who's on their team. And the fact that we would be, if council endorses this this support, the fact that we're paying doesn't mean that that becomes our lawyer. It simply means that council has, in its determination, has felt that this additional support will help to shore up the decision that you made on July 11th, so that in effect, it helps to, if people are going to sell to the municipality, it's one less issue for them to have to address. And I know that ultimately on a closing, they will get a substantial amount of money for most of us. Our real estate assets are one of our biggest things that value that we own. But you could be asset rich and cash poor. So this also helps to facilitate that aspect as well.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Councillor Bussier?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through the chair to Kelly. I guess a couple of questions with your recommendations, Kelly. Just aligns with the Government of Alberta funding approach. That was the province paying for Ptarmigan Park. So this is unprecedented, right? That a city has gone in and purchased property. This has never been done, has it, that we're aware of?
Through the chair to Councillor Bussier, this remains similar to on July 11th. The concept of a municipality self-funding these types of buyouts aren't something that I've seen individually. So while it's in alignment with what happened through the GOA purchase in Ptarmigan Court, we do recognize it is different in the fact that this is a municipally funded voluntary buyout.
Okay. And I guess the other question is to do with the rationale for recommendations. I don't understand how us providing a seller $2,500 allows for prompt release of funds. It's the seller's obligation to pay for his legal fees, and if the seller's paying it, it's still going to transition in a timely fashion as it would if we're paying it. I don't support this for a simple fact is right now we're buying property that we haven't seen, or the majority of we're buying at a price that basically was not what I guess a local appraiser, most of the properties were not what the appraiser valued them at. We're allowing people to use our fees for their own legal advice or legal services, which again, I don't think that's normal, whether it was done with the GOA. I know it hasn't been done with a municipality or city that we're aware of. And I guess the other stuff, I don't understand, and maybe this is a question for Chris, how it improves our position should a future dispute arise. Like that, I don't understand how we paying fees is going to put us in an improved position. So I guess maybe it's open to Mr. Davies to answer.
Through the chair to Councillor Bussiers, if somebody was to attempt to close a transaction without legal representation, or if they were unable to get the legal representation that they felt would best serve their interests, maybe they couldn't afford the full rack rate, but they got a reduced rate from somebody who maybe wasn't as expert. It's possible that should a dispute arise in 2 years, within limitation period, within 10 years, an argument could arise that somebody might say, well, I felt I had no choice. And I don't think that we want to allow those kind of arguments to arise if possible. That's all we're, I think, trying to do is to create a level playing field, which is not dissimilar to what you would see in the awful expropriation word, but the whole expropriation regime is designed to support municipalities or the province who are acquiring lands to support the seller having adequate legal information. So again, I'm not saying that this whole process is predicated on the expropriation model. It simply is an example of how that plays out in the municipal world in other circumstances. So, to respond to the question about timing, it's simply that this would also cover title insurance, which in this circumstance is really gap insurance, because land titles has been operating with delays of anywhere from currently about 6 or 7 weeks to as many as 12 or 14 weeks. And we would not release funds on a closing without gap insurance until we saw the title registration. It's just simply prudent practice. And yes, absolutely, a seller could pay that themselves to facilitate the faster release of closing funds. And in some circumstances, that was considered and discussed. Certainly in the Ptarmigan situation, it was debated, and it was determined that out of the funds that the province covered, the $2,500 in that case, that would also cover the gap insurance, and that did help to facilitate quick closing of the transactions.
Okay, I guess, and I mean, I don't want to be argumentative, but I'm reading here that council providing a seller $2,500 improves the municipality's position. I can tell you right now, us providing $2,500 isn't going to guarantee that the seller is going to go get the best legal advice he can. So I have a hard time reading these recommendations when the statement there to me is completely false, because us paying a seller's legal fees is not going to improve our position. And again, I'm not going to argue with your lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but I don't believe it. A seller paying his own title insurance will close the deal just as quickly as us paying the $2,500.
Councillor Boucher, do you want to hold that for debate? Unless you have a question.
I guess
so. Councillor Ball?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm in agreement here with Councillor Bouzier, struggling with this a little bit simply because Mr. Davis mentioned it, expropriation. This is not an expropriation. This is a voluntary buyout.
But, sorry, Councillor Ball, just as I just said to Councillor Boucher, do you have a question right now? Or hold that for debate?
It's not for debate. So this is a voluntary buyout. What is the difference?
Thank you.
Chris Davis has said that, it predicated similar to expropriation, but this is not expropriation. So what is the difference in these two acquisitions here?
Through the chair to Councillor Ball, I'll ask that Chris Davis will respond to that portion of the question, but in advance of doing so, I do want to expand a bit further on the language and the wording that was used that speaks to the improvement of the municipality's position. I can appreciate that we could adjust the language a bit to be more easily, to translate in a way that's more reflective of what the intention was. But it's also put together based on the feedback that was received from a number of council members on July 11th, indicating the concern around potential contaminants or the abandonment of materials and property as a part of the voluntary buyout. So genuinely, from an administrative perspective, we were putting in one additional step that may help us should in the future, I think the question was asked directly, would we be able to go back to residents if we saw these types of risks become real? And the question was asked to me, would we then be able to, as a municipality, go back and take action on those previous property owners? And so that was part of the decision making in putting this forward. I can appreciate the points that are being brought forward, but I did want to provide that additional level of detail that this was put forward with consideration of some of the feedback from council. But again, if Mr. Davis, if you could speak to the other part of the question.
So before Chris does, can I just comment on that? What does paying legal fees improve that? How does that improve that? We're just paying a bill.
Well, through the chair and with respect to Councillor Ball's question, one of the great challenges currently for the court system is self-represented litigants. So increasingly, individuals are going to the courts without legal representation or perhaps not having legal aid. And it's a real challenge to the court system because the folks that are there have to spend additional time to help self-represented litigants understand some of the processes. And in effect, it's not mandatory that someone has to get a lawyer. They could go and look it up online, they could prepare a transfer document, and they could send it to us. And then we would have to go through it and review it and indicate the issues and questions and challenges. We would also require that they go and get legal advice and get certificate of independent advice, because we know in this contract we're asking for warranty. Certainly, as Director Hansen mentioned, one of the questions that came up on July 11th was, how do we know about risk in terms of environmental contamination? And the response is, we're trying to use the standard Alberta Real Estate Association contractual language, which says, I, the seller, warrant, to the best of my knowledge and information, that there are no material defects in the parcel. And if we don't have somebody getting their own independent legal advice on a question like that, it may arise later, if there was ever a contamination issue, as to whether they consulted with a lawyer and got that kind of independent advice that would make the importance of making those kind of warranties come to bear. So I believe that we're trying to put out the options or the possibilities that trying to manage this without a seller having a lawyer will end up costing the municipality resources in effect by staff time, and that having funds available for somebody to use a lawyer in effect is a value added in some respects to the transaction. And the only reason I suggested expropriation was similar is not because it's expropriation, but because the Law Society and various groups over the years who have come up with the rules of engagement on expropriation determined that the best way to make the transaction fair when a government's involved is to make sure that there's something of a level playing field by supporting sellers, or in case of expropriated parties, that they get advice, and that that's simply the analogy. It's not expropriation, but it's an analogous process involving land. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Benjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for the presentations and clarifications. My first question is, I don't know, maybe this is known to everyone, but how we determined the legal fees of $2,500 to start with. And secondly, if that is a closed final check, or is it an open check? Say we did $2,500 and then there's another issue, is that the end of legal fees for us? Because if we hold ourselves responsible for, if we start paying the bill and there's a problem, how is there any end? Is there a time we can say we can't pay any longer? So that's number one question, which maybe somebody else knows. But and then I wanted to know if this ask was triggered by residents, or we are just being proactive, and what would have motivated us to come forward, other than the points he made. I really don't know if this was something that the residents are expecting. Then I want to know if in the past, when the province did carry out the voluntary buyout, who paid the legal fees at that time? Is this a normal practice that could be expected? Thank you.
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Benjoko. The determination of the fees through administration, we leaned heavily into what had been used for Ptarmigan Court based on the timeline, not much time having passed. So we did lean into that. I'll ask Chris Davis to clarify if he has additional details there. As for would there be an expectation of additional funds beyond the $2,500, the answer would be we're providing up to $2,500 per property, so not to go beyond that. As a part of what is being recommended this evening. The second question related to residents' expectations. This isn't something that had been communicated to residents as being a part of the process, as best I can tell in looking back. It was brought forward. I think that was your next question, was how was it brought forward and how did this come to be a conversation with council? Again, I think I alluded to it in my in the council report and then spoke to it this evening. It was the intent of administration to use this based on our practice in previous similar programs, but not the same type of programs from a funding model standpoint. And it was an oversight on my part by not specifically saying the intention at the July 11th meeting. While there was a general statement, but it wasn't specific enough. So I'll take that piece as it was an oversight on my part and not including this specifically. And then the third question was who funded that from a targeting court standpoint. That was through the government of Alberta. That was funded through an agreement with the GOA.
It was funded by?
The government of Alberta.
The legal fees?
The legal fees, yes.
Oh, okay.
It was a part of the agreement.
Okay, thank you. And then this is an expectation from the residents, yes or no?
Through the chair to Councillor Banjoko, as we've not received an inquiry from residents related to the 2,500. And I would say, I don't want to speak for the residents, but the general tone from residents is they're looking to move forward. And so should council take the recommendation this evening, I'm certain they would appreciate it. If council doesn't take the recommendation this evening, we're still in a position to continue to proceed and move forward. And we're certainly, that wouldn't impact our ability to deliver the program.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Majoko. Councilor Bussier?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Bowman, through the chair to Kelly. Just reading, Kelly, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it says there is no request for additional funding at this time, as the previously approved $14,912,170 is sufficient. If everybody took the buyout, what would be the total? Isn't it the 14,912? So if it is, right?
Through the chair to Councillor Bussier, that's correct.
So if everybody took the buyout, then we'd need to come back to council to ask for the $2,500 then. So there isn't enough if everybody took the buyout.
Through the chair to Councillor Bussier, you are correct. If everyone were to take the buyout, that would not be sufficient funds.
Thank you, Councilor Bussier. Councilor Grandison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair. So kind of a combination between Chris and yourself, but having sold real estate, we would never accept a deal that didn't include either A, title insurance, or B, an RPR. Is that not correct? That's the seller's responsibility at the end of the day. So regardless, we would never enter into a contract where those obligations were not met. Is that not correct?
On to Councillor Grandison's question through the chair, the practice in Fort McMurray has been to remove seller obligation to provide real property reports. So, and we wouldn't require it in this transaction because we're not buying the properties and the homes on them for an ongoing residential use. So the locational characteristics, frankly, are irrelevant to some degree. So that part would go out. But the title insurance is a bit of a misnomer. We have a very effective land title system in Alberta, but what title insurance does is it provides certain things. It helps, frankly, it's bylaw insurance. It says if you ever have a problem with bylaw enforcement, title insurance will be there. And it's also gap insurance, so that when you go to close a transaction and land titles is taking 6 to 12 weeks, in order to overcome that delay, the gap insurance afforded by title insurance helps to allow for the release of funds. Essentially, the title insurance company looks at the title, they confirm there's no new registrations, and they authorize the release of the funds. So that's what title insurance does in Fort McMurray.
Thank you, and I'm very familiar, but again, the seller would have two choices. Either they provide title insurance or they provide an RPR, either are, or we wouldn't accept the contract. Is that not correct?
In this case, not helpful. They would, and maybe this responds to Councillor Bussier's as well, somebody, if they want the money, somebody's going to pay. And either council's assisting by supporting additional funds, as is in the report today, or the seller elects to get the money sooner, and if council doesn't fund it, they'll have to pay it. But somebody, if they want the money faster, somebody will have to get title insurance.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grandison. Any other questions from council? Councilor Weigel?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to the chair. Thank you, Director Hansen, for your presentation. I appreciate it. You guys, this was modeled after government of Alberta and past buyouts. I'd assume we wouldn't go to the table and recreate the wheel. Other levels of government have done buyouts before, and so I would assume that we would have modeled after that. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Weigel, I couldn't speak to other buyouts, but I know that we did model our approach for the Draper voluntary buyout around the Ptarmigan Court voluntary buyout.
Thank you. And so understanding that obviously that this is a new one, but we've modeled after something that's been done in the past. And so all the decisions that has been made by administration up to this point has been done based on what we've seen done in the past. And if it was Ptarmigan Court, then that was also in the RMWB.
Through the chair to Councillor Weigel, that would be correct.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Councillor Grandison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just in following up on this, the difference being a choice. This is not an expropriation, where I understand the legal fees should be paid because we're forcing them to sell their property. In this particular case, we're saying, if you'd like to sell your property, we're willing to buy it. That's the difference versus an expropriation, is it not?
Through the chair to Councillor Grandison, you're correct. It's a voluntary buyout that is fully funded through the municipality. While our approach is similar to others, each is unique, and that is one of the unique characteristics of this voluntary buyout.
Thank you, Councillor Grandison. Councillor Weigel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize. I could be wrong, so I apologize for my ignorance. Was Ptarmigan Court a voluntary buyout, or was it an expropriation?
Through the chair to Councillor Weigel, it was voluntary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? I'm not seeing it. Just to confirm, Kelly, that there's no additional funds needed at this time beyond the $14,912,170 that was already approved in July 2023.
Through the chair to Mayor Bowman, you're correct. As discussed at the July 11th meeting, we didn't anticipate full subscription based on the input from residents. You also had the opportunity to hear from a number of residents over the last public updates that not everybody was intending to participate. I will say since the July 11th meeting to now, we've seen responses, which obviously agreements haven't been completed, but we've seen a number of them that have already indicated they are not intending to move forward with the buyout. On the other hand, we've seen a handful that have said they do intend to.
Okay, thank you. That was my next question too, so thank you. Councillor Weigel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to go back and look at that. Actually, as the July 11th, the recommendation from administration was actually not to go ahead right away with the buyouts, but to actually calculate all of the costs and then come back to it. That was the actual recommendation of administration. We as a council moved it forward expediently. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Weigel, the initial recommendation of administration on July 11th was that be authorized to move forward with presenting offers of purchase to eligible property owners with the commitment that we'd come back with the full cost associated with the next steps. Council ultimately took a decision to move forward with immediate buyouts, and so we're moving through that process at this time. You'll see also included in our report today is a commitment to come back to council and to provide additional visibility related to our progress on that, on the delivery of the program.
Awesome. Thank you for your diligence.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Do you have any other questions from council? I'm not seeing any, so thank you, Kelly. Do we have any delegates to this item?
We have no registered delegates for this item, Mayor Bowman.
Thank you. Have someone make the motion? Councillor Weigel.
I move that the $2,500 for each eligible Draper property be made available to reimburse closing costs as part of the approved council voluntary buyout program, and that administration provide an information update on costs related to the voluntary buyout program to council within 60 days of the program closing date.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Someone second that motion? Councilor Binjoko.
Thank you, Mayor Bowman. I second the motion.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or debate points from council? Councilor Grandison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, Al, turn the back on. There you go. Sorry.
There we go. I'm green. I, for one, will not be supporting this. This is a voluntary buyout, period. Voluntary. And so, hey, you want to sell us your house, now we'll pay your legal fees too. So none of this makes sense to me. So I don't get it. And everything else, you know, we called Ptarmigan a voluntary buyout, but the money came from the province. So we followed the rules that the province sets for normally an expropriation versus a voluntary buyout. So I see them as completely different, and we're just mixing words to try and justify a decision. So I'm just not supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grandison. Councilor Bussier?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I will not support it either. I guess at the end of the day, the folks that, and I don't know how many they are or who they are, and they have the opportunity, if they don't like the program that's in front of them, they can certainly put a for sale sign up and try to maximize more dollars and make it easier for their sale if they want. I guess the question, I still have some real concerns with administration's rationale for recommendation. And I guess, I don't know if this is where I debate it, but I really want someone to explain to me how the recommendation improves the municipality's position, because I don't understand it. And I guess maybe it's back to Mr. Davies or Director Hansen.
Through the chair, if it's okay to respond at this point to a question, I will do my best. I think we've tried to respond, and it was itemized there, and with respect to Councillor Bussier's question, because I really do respect his experience in industry and in many, many years of dealing with real estate transactions. And really, we're just, I think, trying to ensure that the best position be made for the municipality to be successful in what council asked us to do on July 11th, which was to make the proposed voluntary buyout. And as I explained before, we're concerned simply that somebody doesn't have to get a lawyer and that they can proceed without one. And in the event that they do so, it will expose us to more work and ultimately require that we try to give legal advice to the seller. And ultimately, if I'm on the other end of the deal, I can't really be telling the seller, I'm advising you. So in a sense, that's where we got the direction from how the province managed the Ptarmigan program, which is we didn't know why the province decided that was the right way to go. So we had to manufacture the reasons and the rationale that we thought would make sense for the circumstances that we faced. But the province, they decided that that was the right way to go in their program. And we're simply trying to, in a sense, mirror that same program here. We've tried to provide rationale, and ultimately it'll be up to you, council, to determine if that's sufficient to support the motion or not support the motion. And if there's anything specific that I can speak to further, I'll do my best.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and I certainly appreciate your comments. I guess at the end of the day, this is much different. This is local tax-paying dollars. And the way I look at this is, it's coming across as if council doesn't support this $2,500, it could really jeopardize the municipality's position in negotiating a fair and equitable deal for the sellers. And in my opinion, that is misleading. And that's the reason I have a real problem with that being in here, because in my opinion, at the end of the day, no matter who the lawyer is for the seller, and I would anticipate most sellers, if not all sellers, are going to hire a lawyer to do this transaction, and the legal fees will come out of the proceeds of the sale. So unless they're upside down, there's going to be money in the transaction for these folks to go to the lawyer, pay their lawyer fees, and get their collect their check after everything's been paid out. So the way I read it here is it makes it sound like if council doesn't support it, we may be interfering or obstructing a sale for these folks, which in my opinion is not right. But yet that's what I read into this. And I might be the only person that reads into it. Provides property owners with sufficient funds secure independent. Again, the closing costs should come out of the sale. So unless someone is upside down on their mortgage, there's going to be sufficient funds for the lawyer to be paid. Again, it's in here. So to me, again, it's misleading. And I don't know if this is for a CAO to answer. And again, the title insurance is redundant. We all know no matter who pays the title insurance, it's going to facilitate the sale quicker. And again, aligns with the GOA. Well, the GOA was paying for Ptarmigan Park. And it's Fort McMurrayites paying for Draper Road, including the ones that are taking the buyout. But I guess, again, I won't support this, but I guess I'm more upset with the rationale for recommendations being here, because I think it's putting the onus on council, or maybe putting pressure on council to approve this, when really these recommendations, in my opinion, again, my opinion only, are pretty weak. So, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Bussier. Councilor Grandison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the end of the day, this is one of those things where, you know, it's a voluntary thing. You don't have to take it. You know, maybe we learn in the future, and hopefully we never get here again, but maybe we learn in the future that the voluntary buyout includes legal representation. We won't buy it unless you have legal representation. Problem solved. Like, trying to fix legal representation after the fact does not make any sense. I think if that was an expectation or a desire on the part of the municipality, it should have been part of the motion, that the sellers have legal representation in order to enter into this voluntary buyout. Problem solved. You know, we're trying to make sure somebody's got legal representation when that's the responsibility of the seller, not the buyer, the seller. It is in all the contracts and everything else, and somehow we're trying to fix that after the fact. Council approved purchasing the properties at a higher rate than the appraised value in the first place. So I agree with Councilor Bussier. If there's not money left over to pay for legal fees, I think we have a bigger problem.
Thank you, Councilor Grandison. Councilor Weigel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as I appreciate the opinion of my colleagues, I would have to disagree, and I support this motion entirely. I think Director Hansen made it super clear that if we did not move forward with this and that we turn this down, that it actually wouldn't affect us buying out anything. I think that was their words, that this wouldn't actually affect the sale at all. It would actually just move forward as is and go forward. So I don't think that we're talking about $700,000 to $1 million properties, and we're talking about $2,500 per piece. This is what's fair. It was always the intention that that $2,500 was in there because it was modeled after Ptarmigan Court, where the legal fees were provided. So the precedent was set by the government of Alberta. Yes, the municipality has never done it because the municipality, like I said in July 11th, has never had to. The DRP program of the government of Alberta has stopped. And so we took responsibility for our citizens because the government of Alberta stopped. It doesn't matter whether it's the money from the municipality or the province, it's still taxpayers' dollars. So taxpayers paid for Ptarmigan. Yes, it was all of Alberta, and taxpayers are paying for this one because it's what's fair. Legal has said multiple times that we are covering our liability on the back end of this. It has nothing to do with the closing costs. It has to do with the back end of the liability. And so if there is a lawsuit on the other side, this will cost us more money on the back end in legal fees than it will on the $2,500. We've modeled this smartly. I think administration has done an unbelievable job to model this, to do what's needed to get done. We had the chance, we came forward, we got the appraised value, we looked at all the different numbers, and we landed on it. This wasn't a hidden cost. This wasn't something that just came up. This isn't anything that we're fixing. This was always in there. We as a council asked to come forward for clarification. We got clarification, and now here we are. I think we need to go with the direction that administration intended, as this has been modeled by every other buyout, and move forward. This is about what's fair for the people. We're talking about a monumental fee, and we're nickel and diming people if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Weigel. Councillor Bussier?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just, I guess someone from administration explained to us how this would have a negative impact if this motion is turned down.
Through the chair to Councillor Bussier, I'll take the opportunity to clarify the language because I was one of the primary authors on the report. And so when we spoke to best positioning the municipality, my colleague Chris Davis has spoken to the legal side of it. In addition to that, it's about positioning us to move forward in the most expedient manner, recognizing there's different opinions on whose responsibility that is, and I value and appreciate those. The idea of being able to move forward expeditiously would, from my perspective, in the way that we authored this, allowed us to move forward with the next steps once the homes were purchased as well, as our intention is to do so as expediently as possible. And in advance of the next river breakup season would be our intention, depending on how these move forward. But with regards to what would be the harm if these weren't, if this wasn't to be approved today, we would have the ability to move forward, absolutely. You spoke to some properties potentially being in a financial position where they were owing additional monies beyond what's being offered, and that is a true and real situation for a number of property owners. I wouldn't expect that that would stop them from moving forward. I think the community members are rather resilient, and I'm certain they would lean into the community to find ways in which to move forward or other means. But I would say that your decision, if to not accept the recommendation, I don't believe would limit our ability to move forward with the program. Individual property owners may have different implications, but I wouldn't be able to speak to all of those unique implications.
So I guess so there is no negative impact if this motion is turned down, voted down. Through the chair, sorry, to Director Hansen.
Through the chair to Councillor Bussier, I would say while the language within the report is received differently by each person, I would stand by the recommendation that it does change the position of the municipality. All things that with council decision, we can adjust our approach and do what we can to support residents through the next phase. So negative or positive, I couldn't particularly articulate. I do believe the recommendation is put forward with the intention to best position the organization in order to move forward with this from a resident perspective, from a future cost and risk mitigation based on the comments from council on July 11th, and also with the mindset of the overall intention of reducing risk within the community and encouraging uptake. That being said, it certainly can move forward.
Okay, I guess through the chair to Chris Davies, Chris, I guess I'm going to need help on how us, the city, the RM, the taxpayer paying legal fees will reduce reduce the risk to the municipality. I'm struggling with that.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Bussiers, I can understand why you'd struggle with it, because at the end of the day, we expect that the homeowner, the sellers, will likely get a lawyer. It'll certainly be a lot harder for me to close if they don't have a lawyer, and I certainly would be pushing for them to get independent legal advice so they understand the nature of the contract. Would somebody on a $500,000 or $1 million sale equivocate and not pay those fees? Probably not. But I don't know that that's driving this, just that we were trying to make it clear that the fairness principle and ensuring that the municipality isn't trying to backstop the deal by helping sellers through their own situation is simply it's trying to make the whole process easier. So does it help my job in trying to close these transactions? Probably. To exactly the question raised by you, Councillor Bussiers, I don't think it's going to ultimately negatively impact the municipality, but it was a big question at July 11th. What about things, for example, like environmental contamination? And I know council was really concerned about that and about how we move forward in the face of those kinds of potentialities. And really what we did is we told you and council that the contract would solve that, because it says in there there's a warranty, a vendor warranty. And so it's really important that the sellers understand the implications of the kind of warranties they're making on the sale. And maybe that's what we're trying to say, to the extent that the sellers understand the import of the contract they're signing by getting good legal advice, the municipality benefits. Now, who pays? Maybe that's the final question. It's really what council's being faced with tonight. Whose obligation is that? And you, council, will make that decision.
Yeah, and I through the chair, I appreciate that, Chris. I guess at the end of the day, like when we sign these contracts, we warrant, but we don't have to prove. Like, it's to the best of our knowledge, there's no environmental contaminants or anything like that. So I guess at the end of the day, lawyer asks you, you say no, that you're not aware of anything. So again, I struggle with whether you're paying my legal fees as a seller or I'm paying my own legal fees as a seller, how that's going to alter the questions or the answers or the legal advice that I'm provided. Again, these people are aware, though, that if they don't like any of the terms or conditions of the buyout, they're certainly free to put a for sale sign up and try to sell it on their own, correct?
I'll answer through the chair. Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bussier. Councilor Banjoko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am supporting this motion. Again, back to my original debate on July 11th, when we look at the total cost of what we could be paying if we don't clean this up and get it done with, I have to say $2,500 is significant, but not in this case. So if we look at it holistically, and I appreciate and respect the knowledge of my colleague who has been in real estate for years and knows what should be obtainable in a normal circumstance. So, and of course, both colleagues who are renowned real estate men. But in this case, they are not, it's voluntary, but nobody has come to me to say, do you want to sell your place in Timberley? Because there's no reason for the government of Alberta or the municipality to ask me to. So I think we need to think about that. And we are at this point, if this will make it move forward, though it's not going to hinder things, then I think if we look at the percentage of, I think the entire amount that we would be spending is, I don't know, maybe 30,000 or thereabout. And we've already released 14 point something million. So I don't know that it's really going to be a lot of impact in any way. I also finally want to clarify the reference to insurance. So this is coming out of our insurance, is that correct? Of the insurance that we've already paid for, is that correct? I saw something about...
Through the chair to Councillor Banjoko, no, the funds wouldn't be coming out of insurance, but rather they were allocated through emerging issues as a part of the July 11th council meeting.
Okay, so then that means there's an additional funding that you're asking for maximum. Hello, 45,000. Is that correct?
Hello, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Councillor Dogard, there's someone else speaking right now.
Yes, sir. I know somebody else. I'm waiting since quite long. So please give me a turn too. Thank you.
Okay. Did you get my question, ma'am?
Through the chair to Councillor Banjoko, at this time, the funds that were allocated on July 11th, we anticipate being sufficient to allow us to move forward based on current interest in the program. As pointed out by Councillor Bussier earlier this evening, if there was full subscription, we absolutely would need to come back to council and request additional funds. That's not what we're anticipating at this time. However, our commitment remains in place to be exceptionally transparent in the way that this is moving forward. And we will continue to provide updates to council as we proceed.
Thank you. So in closing, the impact, when I look at that and all, I think we should do the needful and get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Majoko. Councilor Grandison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I appreciated your answer, Chris. So at the end of the day, if I'm interpreting everything that I heard, the bottom line is this would just make it a little easier. At the end of the day, having sold real estate for years, there's always an expectation that the seller is answering the questions correctly. And with or without legal advice, I've had both. I've had sellers that had lawyers that still required things because they didn't tell the truth. There was leaking tanks on their property and they didn't disclose that. So with or without a lawyer, we could still run into the same problem. So it sounds to me, and as counselors, I think we are supposed to nickel and dime and pay attention to the taxpayers' dollars. That's our jobs, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grandison. Councilor Dogar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the chance after a lot of waiting. I just want to know from the administration how much $2,500 will make a difference to the total budget. Did you get my question?
Through the chair to Councillor Dogar, the requested funds account for 0.3% of the total budget that's been approved by council on July 11th.
Okay, thank you very much, administration. I appreciate your efforts. A lot of work has been done. And at least if some money is going, it is going for the welfare of the taxpayers. I have had meeting with them during community engagements. They are really in a distress and lot of difficult situation. We must help them. So I support the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Dogar. Councilor Weigel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Hansen, at this time, what is the subscription rate? Like, around what percentage are we at right now? If there was a total number of 16 houses, or what was the total, sorry? Was it 19 available properties or 16 available properties?
Through the chair to Councillor Weigel, I'll share these numbers with the understanding that we're in early conversations with residents, and a lot of the conversations that we've been having are indeed pointing them back to speaking with a lawyer based on the layers of questions they're asking. But at this time, we would see, we've seen indication from 2 property owners that they're not interested in the program. Again, they have the opportunity to change that. And then 6 out of the 18 eligible have indicated an interest in proceeding forward at this time. Again, I'm sharing these numbers with as large of an asterisk as possible, recognizing that residents and property owners certainly have time to take these decisions, and we're not holding anyone to the conversations that have been taking place.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Weigel. Any other questions from council? Or debate points? Councilor Cardinal.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess, no, we're in debate. Okay, sorry. No matter what, if there's going to be an environmental assessment, I know that was some of my greatest concerns about the involuntary buyout through on July 11th, and a lot of conversations of course, I mean, a lot of efforts have been put in by administration to come back because of those comments that are made on July 11th council meeting for the voluntary buyout. And I feel that, Mr. Granitson had made some comments about, no matter what, somebody could say that they got the environmental assessment, somebody could say that they didn't, somebody can, say so many other things, but in reality, after we're done buying out properties, they're, if they told us they did or didn't, they're still going to be the municipality's full responsibility. And I guess, I understand everybody's passion for their words that they're speaking today. I just feel that if I wanted to get a lawyer, I'm going to have to go pay for it, no matter what it is you want to get legal advice for. We're not a legal aid society, and I'm not in favor of supporting the motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cardinal. Councillor Bussier?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just through the chair, I guess, to Chris. First of all, I thank administration for their work on this. Obviously, I'm still not supporting it, but just out of curiosity, further to Councillor Cardinal's question, there will be no holdbacks, right? We're just the seller is going to warrant, there will be no holdback in case we discover some environmental pollution or issues with.
Through the chair, we did contemplate a potential holdback only in limited circumstances. So we expect, as part of the buy-sell process, that the homeowners will elect to take certain fixtures or removables, things like fridges, stoves, etc. They have the option to ask that some of those things be carved out of the sale. And we also expect that the properties would be left in a reasonable state, so that, for example, if there's a bunch of abandoned cars on the parcel, we'll do an inspection before closing, and we would, in that event, have a holdback for the cost of removing those kind of left behind gifts. So those will be the kind of things that we would be on due diligence looking to hold back. But other than that, no, the intention is to fully fund.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bussier. Do you have any other questions from council? I'm not seeing any. For myself, I think all great points from everybody. I definitely agree with Councillor Bussier's points about the rationale, and also agree with the other councillors' points about paying for the fees. For me, the biggest tipping point, I think, is going to be that these fees included, we're not going to be going over the approved amount of funding we had. I think if it comes back to another conversation after requesting more funding, I think then I'd have a different opinion on the matter. But I think as of right now, where it's not going to increase any funding, I think that's where I'll be at. So with that, if there's no other questions or debate points, so let's call for a vote. All in favor? Councillor Stroud?
In favor.
Thank you. And opposed? And that's 5-5, so the motion has been defeated. So that's it for today, everyone. Thank you for participating in today's meeting. Marcy Cho, Ken Muscumpton, and have a good evening.